Hey all, today we are going to talk about writing equations. So far we have graphed equations and now we are going to write equations. And when we were looking at graphing equations, we were looking at them in this form, y equals mx plus b. And that is called the slope-intercept form. And it's important to know that m represents our slope. Remember, that's how slanted the line is. And b, we didn't talk a lot about, but that is called our y-intercept. And b is actually a coordinate. So b, the y-intercept, is the place where the line crosses the y-axis. Remember that the y-axis is this one right here that goes up and down. There's even a little y right there to tell you that that's the y-axis. So b is the place where our line crosses the y-axis. And like I said, it's coordinates. It has an x value that is 0, and the y value is the number we use for b. So this is b is a y, and 0 is an x. Our coordinates are always x, y. So all the time, our y-intercept has a coordinate of 0 for x, and then whatever that number is for y, that's going to be b in our equation. So if we want to write an equation in slope-intercept form, and we have the graph, we can just go find the slope and we can find the intercept and we plug them in. So I would always start every time by writing y equals mx plus b. And then I can rewrite it with just y and x. And now I need to just find the values for m and b and plug them in. And so I think b is probably the easiest to find. It's right there where it crosses the y-axis. It has coordinates 0 always for x and 1, 2, 3 for y. And so, like we said, b is the y value. And so in this case, our y value is positive plus 3. We can find our slope by actually starting from that point, and then we can find another point on the line. Any point that's on the line, this point's going to be on the line. And so we find slope the way we've been finding slope, or the way we found slope from a graph. We count up 1 to the right, 5. Our slope is positive 1 over 5. And we should know it's positive because our line is going up to the right. And so that's the equation of our line. So whenever we're given the graph, we can write our equation by finding the y-intercept and the slope. So again, here's my y-intercept, the place where it's crossing the y-axis. The x-coordinate is 0. The y-coordinate here is 5, and y represents our b in our equation. It's positive. Since it's positive, we say plus 5. If it were a negative y value, we would do minus. And then we can go find another point that's on this line. I don't know, I'll say that one. And I can find the slope. I'm going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Down 10. Oops, not down 10, down 9. I went too far. To the right 5. Down is negative. There's my slope. There's the equation of my line. So in order to write the equation of a line, we need to know two things. We need to know its slope, and we need to know its y-intercept. And then we can plug them into y equals mx plus b. And I highly, highly encourage you write y equals mx plus b every time. So now we're presented with the slope of the line, that's m. And we're presented with a point that the line goes through. And so what I would do is label that x and y. And I would always start with the equation of our line. And I can plug in what I know. Y and x are going to stay y and x. I know my slope is negative 2. And so I just need to figure out what is the intercept. And so I can use that with a little help from our friend Desmos. We know one of the points that this line goes through, so we're allowed to plug the x in for x and the y in for y. And we already know the slope, and then we can solve for b. So when we were solving equations, when we wanted to solve for something, we'd move everything else away from it or to the other side of the equal sign. And so I'm going to move mx to the other side of this equal sign. And so when that happens, it switches its sign. So right now it's positive, so then it will become negative mx. Y is positive, so plus y. And then it leaves me with b on the right side. So I can actually use Desmos to sort of evaluate the left side of my equation because I know what m is. I know what one value for y is and one value for x is. So I'm going to go into Desmos and I'm just going to type in my expression negative mx plus y. And remember, you need to use capitals for x and y, or else it's going to graph something, and right now we don't want to graph. And actually, if you hit enter, it's going to give you a slider for all your values. So we can just go and change the sliders to what our values are. We knew that our slope was -2, our x is -1, and our y is 3. And so when we go change our sliders to the values that we know, we get 1. That means that b equals 1. And so that means since it's positive, we can go back up here, put in +1, and we have our equation. So let's do another one. We always are starting with y equals mx plus b. And it might be good to know this new negative mx plus y equals b. And so if I'm starting to build my answer, which I'll write here, I have y. I know my slope is -3/2. I'm going to have an x. And all we need to do is figure out what is the y-intercept. Where does it cross the y-axis? And so again, I have negative mx plus y already in my Desmos. I can go change my values. -3/2 for m, -4 for x, and 2 for y. And -3/2 is -1.5. Oops. And so I get, if you go back up here, it'll tell you that our b is -4. And so I can go up here and plug that in. Since it's negative in my equation, it's going to say -4. And so again, all we need is the slope and the intercept. When we have the graphs, we can pick them off the graph. When we're given the slope, we can use that slope, and then we can use negative mx plus y to use our point to figure out what b is. And so then the next step would be, I'm given 2 points on my line, xy, xy. And so I need to know what is the slope. I need to know what is the intercept. So we kind of have to do 2 things here. So we're always starting with y equals mx plus b. I need to find the slope. If you remember, the slope is subtracting the y's divided by subtracting the x's. So I'm going to put that into Desmos quick. So as you can see, like we did when we were finding slopes, I put my points in a table. I subtract the y's first, then I subtract the x's. I take those 2 values and I write them as a fraction. And then I end up with a decimal, and we want to write our slope as a fraction, so I can press this fraction button and it tells me -3/2. And so we know that our slope is -3/2, so I can start building my equation. And then I'm going to use that negative mx plus y equals b to figure out what b is. And so we needed an x and a y. In this case, we can use either of these x's or y's. I'm just going to use 4 and negative 1. And I've saved this stuff up here. So x is 4, y was negative 1. And what's really nice is our slope is the same as the one we just did, and so we find that our value for b is 5. It's positive 5, so I can write plus 5, and I have my equation. So just added on an extra layer that we have to do a little work to find our slope. It's good to always write your formulas. The more you write these, the more you'll remember them. We're starting to add things on here that we need to know. Of course, you can solve for b every time, but if you remember this new equation, it can help you. And so we're going to start by finding the slope of this line. So I'm going to go ahead and find the slope of this line by putting those points into Desmos. So I put my points into a table. I subtracted my y's, I subtracted my x's, and then I used those two numbers to make a fraction, which in simplest form is negative 4 over 5. So my slope is negative 4 over 5. So I can start building out my equation. Now I need to solve for b. I solve for b by picking one of my points. I'll choose negative 5, 3, making x negative 5 and y 3. And my slope is negative 4 over 5, which is negative 0.8. If you don't know that, you can just type it in, negative 4 over 5. I'll show you that. And we get our intercept is negative 1. B equals negative 1. Pop it up here, minus 1, and we have the equation of the line. So this line will go through those 2 points. As always, if you have questions, please make sure you're asking while you're working through this video so that you don't stay stuck. Stick around and do the problems at the end. While you're working on those, if you need help, please always ask. Take your time, and good luck.